At 12:03 a.m., a frantic pounding rattles the door of Ryan Bennett's lonely gas station. He flips the sign to closed, but the hammering intensifies, urgent, terrified. Ryan pulls on his jacket, steps into the freezing night, and finds a bloodied woman slumped against the pump, eyes wide with panic. Her breath hitches as shadows materialize at the edge of the lot, black SUVs creeping closer like wolves. In that charged moment, Ryan's heart hammers against his ribs. One choice stands between her life and certain death: turn away, or pull her to safety and face the storm. He yanks her inside, slams the door, and the chase begins. If you've ever wondered how far you'd go to save a stranger, drop a comment below with your answer. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss a second of this pulse-pounding journey. Ryan Bennett wiped the last smudge of oil from his hands as the clock on the wall clicked past midnight. The gas station was silent save for the hum of the old neon sign outside and the distant chirp of crickets. His daughter Mia was fast asleep in their trailer behind the station, trusting her dad to be home before the first light of dawn. Ryan yearned for exactly that, a quiet night, a moment to breathe. He flipped the sign to closed, swept the front steps, and began locking doors when a staccato bang drove through the stillness. Strange. He peeked through the glass, nothing but empty darkness. He checked the fuel pumps, ghost town, empty. Then another bang, harder. His muscles coiled. Mia's safety depended on him being cautious. He exhaled, yanked the door open, and called, "Hey, who's there?" Out of the ink-black night stumbled a woman, her face streaked with blood and mascara, her coat torn. She collapsed against the doorframe, eyes frantic, chest heaving. "They're coming," she rasped. "Please help me." A steel rush of adrenaline flooded Ryan's veins. He half-dragged, half-cushioned her into the office, bolting the door behind them. The station's single bulb flickered overhead as he guided her to a battered stool. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the counter. Ryan's mind raced. Who was she? Why here? But the low growl of distant engines answered his unspoken question. He edged to the window. Two black SUVs rolled onto the lot, tire treads crunching against gravel. Headlights swung around, scanning the pumps. He tightened his jaw. "You'll be safe in the back storage room," he whispered, grabbing her hand. "Stay quiet. I'll handle this." She nodded, tears brimming. He ushered her through the narrow hallway lined with oil cans and spare parts into a cramped storeroom piled high with windshield wiper blades and empty cereal boxes. Ryan slammed the door, twisted the padlock, then fled back to the front. His pulse pounded, but his voice remained steady as the SUV's heavy doors thudded on the concrete outside. Two men, one burly, the other lanky, stepped toward the entrance. Each carried a weapon that glinted under the neon glow. The burly one swaggered up. "Open up," he growled. "We know she's in there. Hand her over." His words dripped menace. Ryan flared his palms. "Not a chance. Nobody in here but me." The lanky man circled the station flashlight beam, slicing through the inky black. "Come on, pal," he taunted. "Don't make this messy." Ryan kept breathing. "Messy? Nah, I'd rather keep things clean." He pointed toward the old fridge by the counter. "You want snacks?" "They're over there." Suspicion flickered across the lanky man's face as the burly one grunted. "Forget it. Let's go." They retreated, revving away in a cloud of dust. Ryan didn't exhale until their taillights vanished down the highway. Then he raced back to the storeroom, heart lodged in his throat. The door shook with her sobs. He flicked on the light. She sat huddled, knees to chest, eyes rimmed crimson. "It's okay," he said, voice soft. "They're gone." She lifted her head, her hair matted, a single strand falling across a pale face. "Thank you," she whispered. I thought they'd kill me." Ryan wrapped a threadbare blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe now." He guided her back to the main office, found her a chair, and fetched a bottle of water. She drank like she'd been stranded for days. Beyond the glass door, the world remained ominously quiet. Ryan dialed 911 on the payphone, no signal. He cursed. Out here, help was hours away. He had to trust his two arms, one brain, and the fading courage that kept him going for Mia. He cleared his throat. "Can you tell me who—" She shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "I can't. They'll kill me if they know I talked." Ryan nodded. All right, we'll keep it that way. He offered a reassuring smile, but every instinct screamed danger. In the low light of the station, he noticed a high-end smartphone peeking from her coat pocket. No company logo, just a sleek black rectangle. Rich people didn't wander lonely highways at midnight. Something big was going on. He fetched a spare pair of gloves from behind the counter. Here, put these on, he said, tossing them to her. We'll need to move soon. She looked at him, gratitude and fear battling in her eyes. Thank you, Ryan. Her knowing his name startled him. You said it yourself. He offered his hand. Let's go. He led her through the back door to his old pickup. Mia's favorite stuffed fox lay in the passenger seat, a silent reminder of why he fought so hard. He cranked the engine, the truck growling to life, and peeled away from the station before any other headlights could endanger them. As they sped into the dark, rolling countryside, Ryan glanced at the woman shivering beside him. She clutched a small leather-clutched dressy expensive. Whoever she was, she had secrets worth killing for. His quiet night was gone. His daughter now slept blissfully, unaware that her dad had just chosen to protect a stranger, igniting a chain of events neither of them could have imagined. And so Ryan Bennett's midnight at the pump became the first leap in a journey of courage, loyalty, and hope for himself, for his daughter, and for the woman he vowed to save. The wind whipped against the windows as Ryan steered the pickup down the narrow back road, leaving the gas station's flickering neon in his rearview mirror. The woman's ragged breaths rattled the small cabin, mingling with Mia's soft snores on the bench seat behind them. Ryan clenched the wheel tighter, eyes darting to every shadow. He'd vowed to keep this stranger safe, and if that meant 100 miles to the nearest town, so be it. Suddenly, a crash of thunder rattled the sky, and headlights tore through the darkness ahead. A second black SUV peeled off behind them, engine snarling. Ryan's heart pounded. The woman's head snapped up, terror flaring in her eyes. They found us, she gasped, clutching the leather clutch in her lap. Ryan's jaw set. He pivoted the wheel onto a gravel turnout and slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded gravel, spraying like shrapnel. The second SUV screeched to a halt about 50 feet behind them. Two dark figures spilled onto the road. Ryan leaped from the cab, the woman right behind him, wrapping her arm around his. In here, he hissed, yanking her toward the trees lining the shoulder. He slammed the passenger door shut, flipped off the dome light, and bolted to the brush. The woman stumbled, tears already streaming. Stay close, he whispered, scanning for cover. They ducked beneath low-hanging branches, mud sucking at their boots. Ryan's ears rang with the SUV's engines cutting off, then footsteps crunching on gravel. He pressed the woman against the trunk of a massive oak, trying to calm her heaving chest. Listen to me, he whispered urgently. They can't see us if we stay silent. She nodded, wide-eyed breath hitching as a beam of headlights sliced through the trees, illuminating their hiding spot. The searchlight wavered, sweeping back and forth. Ryan's pulse thundered in his ears. He edged further into the woods, pulling her with him. Come on this way. They raced through the undergrowth, snapped twigs echoing like gunshots. Mia's fox plush sat abandoned on the seat, cold comfort waiting in the truck. Ryan cursed under his breath. Hold on, he muttered, leading the woman down a shallow embankment to a dried creek bed. The waterless channel offered little cover. Thick brush lined its edges. He knelt and pressed his finger to her lips. No noise, he told her. The searchlight swung again, closer this time, teasing them with danger. Ryan's breath caught. He spotted a hollow under a fallen log, a small cavern just big enough to squeeze into. He jabbed at her side. In there. She dove forward, scraping her hands and knees. Ryan followed, lunging after her as the headlights swept past the creek's mouth. He could hear the bark of a distant command, low and authoritarian. They were splitting up. His heart hammered. The log cavern offered barely enough room to lie flat, but it was safety. He crawled inside, pulling the woman with him. The space was cramped and muddy. Her stiletto heels snagged on a root and broke. She whimpered and Ryan shushed her, pressing his finger to his lips once more. Her ragged breathing slowed, but the fear in her eyes burned bright. Outside, branches snapped as the men combed the roadside. Ryan's mind raced. He needed a plan. He scanned the cavern for anything to help. A rusted length of rebar from an old fence lay wedged in the mud. He edged for it, careful not to scrape his hands too loudly. Darkness swallowed his movements. The two men passed the creek bed, marching upstream. Their voices drifted in low tones. She can't have gone far, one hissed. Check every nook. Ryan clenched the rebar knuckles white. The woman trembled beside him. He swallowed hard, heart thudding. The men stepped into the creek bed, their boots brushing dry leaves. Both paused flashlights, sweeping left-right. Ryan held his breath. The beam passed inches from their hiding spot. He could smell the stale diesel on their jackets. Time stretched. Rustling leaves. His pulse drowned his thoughts. Then the voices moved on footsteps fading. Ryan exhaled relief, flooding his chest. He let the woman exhale too, her hand finding his in the dark. "We have to get to the highway," he whispered. "There's a gas station 2 miles north. It's closed, but there's a phone." She nodded, face pale. He squeezed her hand and crept out, rebar in hand, just in case. The moonlight was a sliver in the sky, but the clouds parted, casting a pale glow over the creek bed. They sprinted, stumbling around the fallen log, out of the channel and back onto the road's shoulder. The SUV was gone. Ryan allowed himself a breath. Then he snatched the woman's arm. This way, he hissed, pointing through the trees. They broke into the woods again, heading parallel to the road, thick roots lodging underfoot. She followed, wincing at every root, but determined. 15 minutes felt like an hour. Branches whipped their faces. Mud sucked at their shoes. But eventually the chatter of highway traffic teased them a distant hum that signaled escape. They burst onto the shoulder, blinking under the bright orange glow of sodium street lamps. Ryan scanned the road. A lone 18-wheeler rumbled past, headlights blinding. He raised his arms, stepping into its path. The driver slammed brakes, skidding to a halt. Ryan waved frantically. "Please," he shouted. "We need help." The cassette player scratched and a hard-faced driver leaned from his cab. Ryan yanked the woman forward, ducking as the truck hove to a stop behind them. Quick inside, he urged. The woman stumbled in and Ryan closed the door just as a second SUV roared past them, missing the truck by inches. Inside the cab, the driver peered at them. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What happened?" Ryan's chest heaved. "They're after her." He pointed down the road. 2 black SUVs they tried to get in, the driver cut in. He gunned the engine, spinning rubber as the truck surged forward. Ryan glanced back, headlights receded into the night. The rig's cabin reeked of diesel and stale coffee. The woman sat rigid, clutching her clutch eyes, unfocused. Ryan sank onto the bench seat. "Thank you," he panted. The driver nodded gravely. "Where to?" Ryan swallowed. "Just drive north, the next exit. I'll call the police once we're near." The highway unfurled ahead like a ribbon of hope. Ryan sank back, the storm of adrenaline ebbing into exhaustion. The woman's head lulled, her lashes wet. He offered her the bottled water he'd grabbed from the station. She drank, voice small. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "No apologies. You did what you had to." She met his eyes, sincere but haunted. "They'll never stop." He reached for her hand. "They'll stop when we're safe. I promise." Mia's fox plush sat next to him, its cotton stuffing poking through a seam. He glanced in the rear view, the highway's lights blurred under the rig's windshield. He breathed deep. The night was far from over, but they'd crossed the first barrier. A simple act of kindness at midnight had upended his life. But if he'd learned anything from being Mia's dad, it was that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. And as the big rig barreled through the darkness toward whatever safety lay ahead, Ryan Bennett knew he would follow that promise no matter where it led. Rain pattered against the single-pane window of the storeroom as Ryan fumbled with the lock, adrenaline still crackling through his veins. He bolted the door behind them, deadbolt sliding home with a solid click that sounded louder in the enclosed space than anywhere else. The fluorescent bulb overhead hummed, casting a harsh glare on rows of spilled oil cans, dusty tires, and stacks of paper towels. The air smelled of rubber and cleaning solvent. Ryan rounded on Victoria, placing a firm hand on her arm and guiding her toward a battered metal shelf. "Sit down," he urged in a low voice. "I'll get you some water." Her legs trembled as she settled onto an overturned box, eyes wide and glassy. The fine sheen of rain on her cheekbones caught the light, and she pressed a trembling hand to her temple. "They'll kill me," she whispered. Voice barely audible above the hum of the heater struggling to keep the cold out. Ryan grabbed 2 plastic cups from a crumpled cardboard box and padded back to the busted water cooler in the corner. The rusty tap spat out a thin stream of lukewarm water into one cup, then the next. He returned, sliding a cup into Victoria's shaking hands. She clutched it as though it were a lifeline. He knelt in front of her, setting his cup aside. "Drink," he said softly. "Here." She lifted the cup with both hands, slurping the water in quick, desperate gulps. When she finally lowered it, droplets ran down her chin. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes fluttering closed for a moment. I don't know how I got away." Ryan watched her carefully. Every instinct screamed to protect her, but the chill in her words hinted at a story he wasn't yet ready to hear. "You're safe here," he said, voice firm but gentle. "No one's getting in." She looked up at him, tears pooling in her eyes. "You don't understand," she said, voice cracking. "They're everywhere." They won't stop until her knees buckled and she sank against the shelf, clutching his arm as though it were the only thing holding her upright. Before Ryan could react, her eyelids fluttered and she collapsed forward. Instinct took over. He caught her under the arms and gathered her into his chest, one arm behind her back, the other cradling her head. She rested her cheek against his shoulder, hot tears soaking through his jacket. He pressed a hand to her back, rubbing soothing circles through her damp blouse. "Hey," he murmured. "Hey, look at me. You're okay. Just breathe." She nodded feebly, but panic shimmered across her features. There were men. They had guns. I thought I was dead." Ryan's heart clenched. He tightened his arms around her. "It's okay," he promised. "You're alive. I've got you." She sniffed, shoulders shaking with each breath. He felt the tremor run through her, and he realized how fragile she was in this moment. The fierce, composed woman he'd met at the pump had been stripped away, leaving only raw fear and exhaustion. "I'm Ryan," he said gently, as if that could steady her. "I'm going to look out for you, Victoria. I swear it." She trembled against him, then managed a faint nod. He stroked her hair back from her forehead. "Can you tell me what happened?" Her eyes opened unfocused. She clung to his jacket as though afraid he might vanish. They cornered me after the board meeting. I tried to hide. I ran. But they found me in the parking garage. They dragged me to their car." "Take your time," Ryan urged. He sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, her head resting against his chest. He tilted her chin up so she could meet his eyes. "I'm listening." She inhaled a ragged breath, nodded. "They knew my schedule. Someone on the inside. They wanted something I have. Or they thought I had. A flash drive. Papers. I don't even know. They shoved me into the back of a black SUV. One of them had a gun against my ribs. Her hands clutched at his shirt, fingers digging in. I begged. I said, 'I'll give it to you, just let me live.' But they just laughed. And then I woke up running. I jumped out of the car at a stoplight. I just kept running until I saw your station." She broke off, tears coursing down her cheeks. Ryan's chest tightened with anger and helplessness. He wiped her tears with his sleeve. "You did the right thing. You got out. You're safe now." She looked up at him, fear and gratitude warring in her eyes. "Safe?" she echoed, voice trembling. "Not yet. They'll come back. They'll find me." Ryan straightened, his resolve hardening. "Not if I can help it," he said. "We'll figure a plan." She let out a shaky laugh. "What plan?" "You're a gas station attendant. I'm being hunted by assassins." He drew a deep breath. "That may be true, but I know this station inside out. I know every exit, every hiding spot. And my daughter's upstairs. House is just down the road. We can get you out of here someplace they won't look first." She swallowed, hugging him tighter. "I could never repay you." He shook his head, voice gentle. "Then do this, tell me everything you know about who's after you. We'll start there." She nodded slowly, head lifted to look at him. The stark light revealed her exhaustion. Dark circles under her eyes, hair matted with sweat and rain. He passed her the second cup of water. "Drink some more," he said. "You need to stay hydrated." As she sipped, he scanned the storeroom for potential improvised barricades, a heavy toolbox on the floor, a length of chain hanging from a hook, even a crowbar leaning against a corner. If they needed to hold the door, any of these could buy them precious seconds. Victoria's voice was steadier now, though her hands still trembled. I'm Victoria Lane, she said, CEO of Parrington Industries. Ryan's breath caught. This delicate woman, royal in her posture diamond, under her blouse, but vulnerable now, was a billionaire CEO. He swallowed that surprise, reminding himself that fear levels the highest peaks. Lane Industries, he asked quietly. That big tech conglomerate. She nodded, setting the water aside. They wanted a prototype, something I developed an AI chip. They think I have the only copy. They'll do anything to get it. He processed that heart thudding. A corporate war had spilled into this rural corner of the world. All right, he said. Here's what we do first. Before he could finish, the storeroom door rattled. The bolt rattled under a hard knock. Ryan's head snapped to the sound, every muscle tensing. Who's there? He called, voice steady, despite the adrenaline. A muffled male voice answered. Open up, Bennett. We know you're in there. Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Victoria, who shrank back against the shelf. Stay down, he murmured. He rose and moved to the door, removing his hands from Victoria's shoulders so he could slide the chain latch. The door rattled as they heard boots thundering in the hallway. Ryan swung the door open a crack, not enough for a body to fit through, and pressed his shoulder against it as he peered out. Two men in leather jackets and jeans glared back, one aiming a flashlight through the gap. There, the taller one barked. Don't play games. Ryan's voice was calm but firm. You've got the wrong place. No one in here. The shorter man grabbed the handle and yanked. The chain held. Cut the crap, he snarled. We know you took her. Ryan braced his foot door, wobbling under their tugging. I'm not letting you in, he said. Walk away. They exchanged a look, then the flashlight beam swept past the door again. We'll be back, the taller one said. And next time we won't be so polite. With a final yank, they stepped off. Ryan waited until their footsteps receded down the hallway before bolting the chain and dropping to his knees beside Victoria. She stared at him, eyes wide as saucers. He pressed a finger to her lips. Shh. It's okay. They don't know where you are now. She nodded, tears glinting. He pulled her close once more. Rest, he whispered. Get your strength back. We'll figure out our next move. Victoria leaned into him, exhaustion finally pulling her under. As he held her, Ryan's mind raced with possibilities, calling the police would blow their cover, but leaving her here was suicide. The only choice was to get her out of town and fast. He pressed his forehead to hers. Hang on, he promised, voice fierce in the hush of the storeroom. Rain streaked down the window, and somewhere above the heater clicked again, promising warmth. He would not let those men find her. Not now. Not ever. And with that vow, he prepared to take the next step, whatever it took to keep Victoria Lane safe. Rain spilled in through the grimy front windows in harsh slashes of white as the black SUV's headlights swept across the rows of gas pumps. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest, a relentless drumbeat that threatened to give him away. He crouched low beside the storeroom door, Victoria's hand clutched in his, her eyes wide and fearful in the dim light. Outside, the engine idled, muffled but insistent, a predator staking its claim. He pressed his back against the cool metal of an oil drum and tried to swallow the lump in his throat. Victoria sank beside him, knees drawn to her chest, and he covered her hands with his own. They're here, she whispered, voice trembling. They found me. He forced a calm he didn't feel. Just breathe, he murmured. Remember you're safe as long as I'm here. Footsteps echoed down the narrow service corridor. The door rattled as two sets of heavy boots scraped against the concrete. Ryan tensed, every muscle summoned, every ounce of composure he could muster. When the door handle rattled, he took a steadying breath, reached up, and half opened the chain latch just enough to peer through. Two men filled the frame. One was tall, broad-shouldered arms corded beneath a leather jacket. The other shorter, lean, with sharp eyes that looked hungry for trouble. Both carried handguns tucked into the waistbands of their jeans. Their faces were half hidden in shadow, but Ryan knew he'd seen them before at the roadside, at the pump in the mist of that desperate midnight chase. He swallowed and stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the door. "Can I help you, fellas?" he said, voice low and calm. Rain droplets spattered around them, tracing paths across the neon glow of the pumps outside. He kept his right hand visible, palms open, disguising the adrenaline that coaxed warmth through his veins. The taller man squared his shoulders, shining a flashlight through the gap. Its beam cut across Ryan's face, making him squint. "Cut the act, Bennett," he growled. "We know she's in here. We know you're hiding her." Ryan shrugged, adopting the easy confidence of a man minding his own business. "You got the wrong place," he said. "Nobody in here but me and some spare parts." The lean man stepped closer, tilting the flashlight to illuminate the storeroom's cramped interior. Boxes of wiper fluid, stacks of oily rags, a battered toolbox, everyday clutter in a small-town station. Nothing more. "Don't bullshit us," he snapped. "We saw her go in here. That woman you helped, she's worth a hell of a lot more than a free tank of gas." Ryan's mind raced. He needed to stall to give Victoria time to slip away to the basement hatch to the back exit anywhere but here. He cleared his throat. "Look, lady seemed all right when I sent her on her way," he said. "You sure you didn't catch the wrong guy?" The tall man's jaw twitched. "Don't play dumb," he spat, kicking at a discarded tire tread. "We've got orders to find her. We know she's inside. Let us in and nobody gets hurt." Ryan shook his head slowly. "If I let you in, you'll destroy half my merchandise," he said, voice gentle. "Not much I care to lose over a stranger I've never met." The shorter man leaned in, voice low and threatening. "You got 10 seconds to decide, Bennett, or we'll tear this place apart." Ryan's pulse sang in his ears. 10 seconds. He glanced back at Victoria, whose pale face gleamed in the flashlight glare. He mouthed "run," but her eyes squeezed shut in fear. They were pinned together, prey and protector, in a tiny metal cage. He turned back to the men and met their gazes evenly. "You could," he said softly, "but then who'd pay me for the mess? You fellas got a license for property damage." The tall man scowled, frustration blossoming in his eyes. He tapped the butt of his flashlight against the doorframe. "You think this is funny?" Ryan shrugged, trying to look casual. "Just trying to keep things simple." He edged sideways, blocking the view back into the storeroom. "Why don't you show me that license anyway? Or better yet, find a judge to order this place searched." "I'll wait." The lean man's finger curled around his gun's grip. Rain drummed on the roof in an urgent tattoo, as if mirroring Ryan's rising panic. The tall man reached for the doorknob, yanked on it with a hard jerk, and found the chain latch still looped, denying him entrance. He cursed under his breath, stepping back. "You're gonna regret this," he promised, voice low and dangerous. "We'll be back. Next time we won't be so nice." Ryan nodded, keeping his tone conciliatory. "Yeah, you do that," he said. "Enjoy your night." Their silhouettes retreated down the corridor, boots thundering as they disappeared into the outer lobby. Ryan waited until the footsteps faded, until the rocking echo of the SUV's engine grew faint again, then bolted the chain back into place. He closed the door with a trembling hand and leaned his head against the cool metal. His breath came in ragged gasps. Victoria pressed her ear to his chest, listening to his heartbeat like a warning siren. He knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "They're gone," he said. "For now." She exhaled, shuddering. "They'll be back," she whispered. "They won't stop." Ryan nodded. "I know," he said, wrapping his arms around her, "but I'm not letting them take you." Tears pooled in her eyes. "Why do you care?" "You barely know me." He held her tighter. "Because you needed help." And because he swallowed hard, searching for words that sounded true in his head, "I couldn't let you die on my watch." She stared up at him. The fight once fierce in her eyes, now fluttering like a wounded bird. Ryan gently lifted her chin until their gazes met. "Listen to me," he said. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe. But you have to trust me." Her throat worked, and she blinked, nodding through her tears. "I trust you." He guided her back against the shelf, gathering his thoughts as warning sirens pulsed on the horizon, distant but closing. The SUV might have driven off, but its promise lingered in the night air. Ryan rose to his feet and grabbed a dusty flashlight off the floor. Its beam was weak, but it would have to do. He clicked it on, then shone it around the storeroom, searching for an exit he'd overlooked. "There's a back door through the office," he said, voice low. "It leads out to a service yard. If we can slip out that way, we might lose them." Victoria blinked, rubbing at her eyes. "But what about your daughter?" He pressed a finger to her lips. "Mia's with Mrs. Fletcher next door. She's safe. I made sure they'd look after her if I got tied up. Right now we need to move." She sniffed, gathering her courage. "Okay." He passed her the flashlight. Stay close, he warned, hand resting at the small of her back. Together they crept out of the storeroom, stepping lightly over oil-stained rags and discarded wiper blades. The station was quiet now, the rain muffling the world outside. He guided her through the dimly lit office, a swivel chair toppled on its side, a dusty register, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling on the counter. The door ahead groaned on its hinges, his path to freedom. Ryan hesitated at the threshold, listening for footsteps, for any sign that the men were returning. When none came, he slipped through, then paused to help Victoria push the door open. Beyond lay the service yard, slick with rain and lit by a single floodlight that cast long, trembling shadows. A row of dumpsters lined one wall, and beyond them the chain-link fence that separated the station from the dark highway. Ryan led her along the building's side, keeping low where the floodlight missed the ground. They reached the fence's gate and exchanged a look he'd need to cut through fast. He rummaged in his back pocket for the Swiss Army knife he always carried, the same one he used to fix Emily's crooked shoelaces. He flicked out the blade, slicing the chain's padlock with quick, practiced strokes. Each click of metal echoed like thunder. Finally, the lock dropped. He yanked the gate open. Victoria slipped through, first her coat soaked through hair stuck to her face in cold rivulets. He followed, slamming the gate shut behind them. They dashed across the asphalt rain, blurring the world into streaks of gray. As they rounded the corner of the station, Ryan risked glancing back. The black SUV's headlights reappeared at the front entrance, engine roaring as it lunged toward them. He grabbed Victoria's hand and they sprinted toward the highway. He didn't look back again. He could feel her heartbeat against his side, fast, fragile, alive. Together they bolted into the night, every step a promise that he would never let those hunters win. And as the SUV's engine faded behind them, Ryan Bennett vowed that no darkness, no threat would ever break his word. She would make it to safety, or they would face the end side by side. Rain pounded against the pavement like applause as Ryan crouched behind a rusted repair rack, heart drumming. The black SUV had screeched to a halt where the highway met the station entrance, its engine idling in a low growl. Two silhouettes emerged, rifles raised. Their footsteps splashed through puddles as they approached the shadowed edge of the service yard. Ryan pressed his back to the metal rack, gauging the distance between him and the trucks. He clutched Victoria's hand, her fingers trembling in his. She pressed her cheek to his side, eyes wide, but she didn't speak. She trusted him. He owed her that much. He needed a distraction, something loud, something sudden enough to pull their attention away. His mind flashed to Mia and the way he taught her to startle Dad's old pickup awake with a slam of the door during their impromptu mechanic lessons. He could borrow that. "Stay here," he whispered, but his voice cracked. He tapped Victoria's arm and slipped free, sprinting toward the station's open bay door. She watched him go, fear etched on her face, but she nodded as if understanding that this was her only chance. Ryan barreled into the bay. The open garage smelled of oil and damp concrete, echoing with the hiss of dripping rain. He grabbed the battered door panel beside him, one he'd planned to replace but hadn't had the money. He hauled it upright, braced it at the bay entrance, then yanked free the ancient cord that kept the overhead door closed. The panel slithered forward with screeching iron wheels. At that exact moment, the two armed men stepped into view outside. One glanced up, startled by the roar of metal. The panel clanged against the frame, rattling like a gunshot. The taller man raised his rifle eyes, darting toward the racket. "Hey, Ryan!" hollered from the bay voice, loud and urgent. "You're not welcome here. You fuckers get out of my shop!" He kicked a toolbox across the concrete. It tumbled into the path of the oncoming flood of rainwater, clattering like a grenade. The shorter man yanked his rifle up, shifting focus to the noise, while the taller squinted into the bay, trying to track the sound. Ryan pivoted, slamming the bay door chain back into place. The panel locked with a final clang. He dashed to the storeroom entrance, throwing the door open and grabbing Victoria's hand. The two ran as 1 feet, splashing through shallow water, hearts pounding. Once outside, they darted toward Ryan's pickup, parked a few yards down the lot. The SUV's headlights bored into their backs as the shorter goon sprinted around the bay corner, weapon raised. The taller man stayed behind for a moment, shouting orders. "Stop!" the second man yelled. "We've got her!" Ryan didn't look back. He thrust Victoria toward the passenger door of his truck, yanked it open, and shoved her inside. The rain drummed on the roof, and she collapsed into the seat, gasping for breath. Ryan slammed his hand on the horn. The horn blared a discordant warning into the night. The shorter man skidded to a halt in front of the truck rifle, rigid in both hands. Ryan threw the truck into reverse tires, spinning on the slick asphalt, sending water flying like spray from a fire hose. The SUV thundered behind them, tires churning mud. Ryan swung the wheel hard, fishtailing past the row of pumps and out onto the highway. He mashed the accelerator until the engine roared, then lurched forward, tires biting into the wet pavement. The goon fired one shot, missing wide as acrylic fenders deflected the bullet with a sharp ping. Ryan swerved to avoid a stray shell casing glinting on the road, then headed down the two-lane highway, rain blurring the yellow dividing lines into ribbons of gold. He glanced at Victoria in the passenger seat. Her breath came in little gasps, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. "Hold on!" he shouted above the engine's scream. His knuckles were white on the wheel. "We're getting you someplace safe." She nodded, gripping the seat edge. "Go, Ryan. Don't stop." He flicked the high beams on, pressing down harder on the gas. A mile ahead, the road forked. The left led to the town center, the right to the old forest road no one used after dark. He yanked the wheel, and the truck fishtailed briefly before catching traction. He chose the forest road. Behind them, the SUV's lights followed like a stalker's stare. Ryan downshifted, the truck's growl deepening, and dove into the whispering trees. Branches lashed windshield and side mirrors as he pressed onward, every muscle coiled. Victoria's hand touched his knee. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought—" He cut her off, voice firm but gentle. "Shut up and breathe," he said. "We'll lose them." The road narrowed to a single lane, dipped into gullies, then climbed again under arching pines. Ryan's headlights carved golden tunnels in the darkness. The SUV's lights emerged behind them, smaller now but unrelenting. He kept going. After what felt like an eternity, the forest road opened onto a gravel clearing where an old service shack stood silent. He'd once seen it used by forest rangers, no power but a locked metal door, and windows covered by grime. He steered toward it, fishtailing on the loose stones. He killed the engine, and silence hit them like a physical force. Rain pelted the roof in a drumming roar. Beyond that, the world was still. Victoria's chest rose and fell with quick breaths. Ryan shut off the lights, yanked the keys, and leapt from the cab. He flung open the passenger door and yanked Victoria out. Together, they scurried across the gravel to the shack. The door was locked, but he'd always carried a hacksaw blade in his belt, a habit formed from too many broken-down clients needing quick fixes. He pulled it free, sliced through the hasp, and pressed the door open. Inside the shack smelled of damp wood and mildew. A single lantern lay on a shelf, its wick long gone. He kicked at the door, slamming it shut, then bolted the inside latch. The rattling footsteps came moments later, accompanied by the SUV's headlights bouncing like bandits in the raising gloom. Ryan grabbed a length of driftwood leaning against a wall and held it like a club. Victoria stood clutching his jacket, eyes wide but resolute. He pointed to a back window, cracked just enough for air, and mouthed, "Stay here. Don't move." He crossed to the front door, stood beneath the window, and drew the board in front of it. His silhouette filled the small pane as the headlights splashed through. 2 rifles poked around the doorframe. "Come on out," one of the goons bellowed. "You know she's in there?" Ryan tapped the board with the driftwood, pretending to be a phantom. "I told you I don't know her," he called. "Get out of here before you break something." The taller man's flashlight beam swept the yard, illuminating Ryan's impossibly calm stance. Then the light flicked to a fallen tire and a flash of mud in his diversion. The goon cursed and turned back to inspect, shouting to his partner. In that heartbeat, Ryan assaulted the latch from inside, forcing the door. Victoria shrieked, instinct warring with fear, but he clasped her hand and yanked her toward the window. They climbed through the small opening, rain washing them like baptism, and tumbled onto the forest floor. Behind them, the shack door burst open. The taller man's silhouette filled the doorway, fists raised in anger. But Ryan and Victoria were already sprinting into the trees. Branches whipped at Ryan's face, branches snapping beneath his boots. He guided her through a tangle of roots as the forest swallowed their scents. A final shot rang out, a loud crack that echoed against the trunks. Ryan felt the whoosh of air as it passed overhead. He didn't stop. He could feel Victoria's small hand in his warm and desperate clutched in his own. They ran until the rain and darkness blended into nothingness, until the forest's dense protective blurred into safety. After a mile, they collapsed beside a stream, chests heaving, soaked to the bone. The downpour softened to a drizzle. Victoria sat beside him, knees hugged to her chest, shivering. He wrapped his jacket around her, pressing close. They listened to the forest's quiet symphony, water trickling, leaves dripping, birds calling into the storm's wake. No engines roared. No threats loomed. Victoria looked at him, rain streaming down her face. "You saved me," she whispered. "You could have run." He shook his head, voice raw with conviction. "I couldn't leave you, not when you needed help." Her lips quivered into a small smile. "Thank you, Ryan." He reached into his pocket, finding the crumpled scrap Victoria had dropped in the station, a tiny doodle of 2 stick figures beneath a makeshift shelter. He pressed it into her hand. "Fold this into your heart," he said, "because no matter what happens next, you are not alone." She tucked the drawing into her coat, and together they sat in the willow-dark forest, 2 souls bound by a narrow escape rein and an unspoken promise that whatever the dawn brought, they'd face it side by side. The truck's tires hissed against the wet asphalt as Ryan pressed the accelerator, leaving the gravel lot and its hunting shadows far behind. Rainwater that had clung to Victoria's soaked hair was now flung off the windshield, driven away by the fury of their escape. Every blur of tree and telephone pole that swept past was a reminder they were running, but to where he didn't know. All he knew was that Mia's safety. Mia, his little girl back home asleep in her bed, collapsed in his heart, alongside the trembling woman at his side. Victoria huddled against the passenger door, shivering. The collar of Ryan's jacket covered her neck, but perspiration and terror still slicked her skin. She stared out the window, watching orange streetlights flicker into the blur, and she pressed a hand to her temple as if warding off a splitting headache. "I'm sorry," she murmured, voice ragged with guilt and fear. I never meant to drag you into this." Ryan kept his eyes on the road, one hand steady on the wheel, the other sliding over to rest gently on her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, "you'd do the same for me." He flicked on the high beams, cutting through the black like twin lances. "My daughter taught me that. You help someone in trouble, full stop. No questions." She turned to him, rain-soaked lashes trembling. "You don't even know who I am." He swallowed around a tight knot in his throat. "Doesn't matter." His jaw clenched as he scanned the desolate road, no cars, no lights, just the endless corridor of night. He'd already committed. "I'm not leaving you." A distant rumble sounded overhead. An airplane, maybe, but Victoria's gaze followed the sky as though expecting gunships. Ryan prayed that nobody had the means to follow them already by air. He eased off the gas. "We need a plan," he said, voice low but urgent. "I can't keep driving blind. We've got to find somewhere you can rest." She nodded, teeth chattering when she forced a smile. "Rest. Right. I haven't slept in days." He caught a glimpse of her eyes in the side mirror. Dark circles, fear etched into every line. He glanced down at the passenger seat where her jacket lay crumpled. "There's an old cabin off McAllister Road," he said, voice rough. "No electricity, but it's dry. I went there one time when the storm knocked out my power, fixed the roof for Mrs. Jenkins. She said I could stay any time. It's remote. No cell service." Victoria tilted her head, grateful. "That might work." Ryan flicked his indicator and swung the wheel onto the 2-lane road that led deeper into the pines. Rain drums on the roof punctuating each passing moment, but it didn't slow him. He steered with precision honed by years of late-night drives to Mia's soccer games, to the grocery store before dawn. Even in the dark, he seemed to know exactly where to go. As they left the last streetlight behind, Victoria caught her breath and placed a hand over his on the wheel. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was so small it nearly vanished in the roar of the engine. "I can't thank you enough." Ryan offered a half smile, eyes still fixed ahead. "You helped me out of a bind, too." He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders, just a fraction. "It's what you do." The road narrowed until the treetops pressed close like an unbroken tunnel. The rain eased to a drizzle, and the moon hidden behind cloud felt 1,000,000 miles away. Victoria leaned back, tucking her arms around herself. "I don't even know how they found me," she said quietly. "I've been careful. Security detail, convoys. I always thought I was safe." Ryan's grip tightened on the wheel. "You've been running from something bigger than you probably ever expected." He cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. You okay telling me what happened? She stared out the side window, watching water bead and run in rivulets down the glass. After a long moment, she swallowed and began. I'm the CEO of Lanthorn Technologies. We produce specialized communications hardware. Government contracts private research. There's been a leak, someone selling our proprietary data. Last night I discovered who is behind it. For my own safety, I fled my hotel. I thought I could outrun them until morning. Ryan's brow furrowed. Selling tech secrets. People die for that kind of intel. He pressed his lips together. You must be pretty important. Victoria gave a rueful laugh. Important enough that they'll kill to keep me quiet. She turned to him, eyes haunted. I'm not just helpless. I'm a target. Ryan exhaled slowly. The road ended abruptly at a locked gate, his turnoff to the cabin. He rattled through his jacket pockets until he found a small keychain. He clicked the cabin gate lock open, swung the gate inward, and followed the gravel drive. Victoria watched the cabin materialize through the windshield-weathered wood moss on the roof, a single window glowing faintly with the reflection of the truck's headlights. The landing lights of security had long since been turned off. Nobody had lived here except the Jenkins, and for one stormy night, Ryan. He guided the truck to a halt beneath a canopy of pines, gears crunching against gravel. The sudden silence was deafening. The rain had stopped altogether. The cold night air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Ryan killed the engine. The cabin sat there waiting like a refuge carved from the wild. He turned to Victoria. Stay here, he said, voice firm. Don't open the door for anyone. She nodded, wrapping the jacket tight around her shoulders. He reached across, pressed a gentle hand against her arm. I'll be right back. He grabbed his flashlight from the center console and stepped into the night. The gravel crunched beneath his boots, and he approached the cabin door, found the padlock, and clicked it open. He jiggled the doorknob, tested the latch, then pulled the door inward. It creaked on rusty hinges. Inside the cabin was dark and musty. A faded rug covered the floor, a beaten-up wood stove sat cold in the corner, and a single lantern hung from a hook. Ryan fumbled for a match in his pocket, struck it, and held the flame to the lantern's wick. The cabin glowed with a soft amber light. Dust motes danced in the air. He moved to a storage shelf against the wall, found a stack of thick blankets and an old battery-powered lantern. He set it down on his rickety table, then crossed to the door and threw it wide, shining light toward the truck. Victoria's silhouette stood there, rigid with relief. He guided her inside, closing the door and relocking it. Here, he said, handing her one of the thick wool blankets. Sit by the stove. It'll be warm in a minute. He knelt to light a small fire, kindling newspaper a match. The stove hissed and spat sparks, then creaked to life, sending a wave of heat cascading through the room. Victoria shivered as she sank onto the front of a sagging sofa, tucking the blanket around her knees. She watched the fire glow, shadows flickering across her face. Her eyes glimmered. Thank you, she whispered again, squeezing the blanket. Ryan climbed onto a crate near the back wall, his silhouette framed by the rising warmth. Get some rest, he said softly. I'll set up my sleeping bag on the floor. We'll figure this out by morning. Her lip trembled and she wiped at her eyes. I'm sorry you have to do this, she said. I'm so sorry. He offered her a small, understanding smile. You saved me a few nights ago, he reminded her quietly. We're even. He paused, his gaze drifting to the window where the last of the rain tapped its farewell. Besides, you'd do the same for me. She nodded, tears glinting in the firelight. I hope you're right. Ryan stood and moved to a corner, unrolled his sleeping bag, and patted the ground. Try to sleep, he said gently. It's going to be a long night. And as Victoria curled beneath the blanket, eyes fluttering shut, Ryan kept watch by the window, his silhouette strong against the lantern's glow. Outside, the night held its breath. Inside, two strangers bound by desperation and the promise of protection found a fragile peace, if only until dawn. Rain pelted the windshield as Ryan steered the truck onto the shoulder of the two-lane highway. The cabin's old wood stove might have been a sanctuary for the night, but Victoria's unease was palpable. She hadn't slept more than a few fitful minutes before stirring and whispering that they needed to move. Her pursuers hadn't given up, and Ryan vowed not to let them catch a glimpse of his passenger again. He guided the truck past an unlit curve and spotted the neon sign of the Rolling Pines Motel flickering through the downpour, one of those dilapidated motels where the walls leaned in and the carpets had seen better decades. But it would do. Trusting the scattered tourists and the motel's sleepy owner to overlook them felt safer than any remote cabin in the woods. With a careful turn, he pulled into a nearly vacant parking lot and cut the engine. Rain drummed on the roof, turning the overnight world into a blur of metal and neon. Victoria sat rigid in the passenger seat. Her soaked hair stuck to her cheeks, and the dampness highlighted the sharpness of her features. Ryan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "This is it," he said. "We'll grab a room, get you dry clothes, and lie low until dawn. No one's looking twice at a middle-of-nowhere motel." She nodded, wrapping the cabin blanket tighter around herself. There was a moment of silence filled only by the sputtering of rain against the glass. Then she exhaled, voice soft. "Thank you, Ryan. I don't know how I can repay you." He shrugged, fishing his keys from his pocket. "You already did. If you're safe, that's enough." He climbed out into the night, the cold numbing his face, and unlocked a ground-floor room with a keycard. The door opened on a musty carpet patterned in archaic swirls of brown and orange, and they stepped inside, dripping water onto a plastic mat by the door. Inside, the neon glow from the sign outside cast shifting rectangles of blue and red across the threadbare bedspread. Ryan flicked on the overhead light, revealing two twin beds, a small TV mounted in the corner, and a sink where the faucet leaked just enough to leave a ring of mineral deposits. He rounded the corner to a tiny bathroom and found fresh towels draped over the doorframe. The place wasn't luxurious, but it had a certain comforting anonymity. Ryan handed Victoria one of the towels. "Here," he said. "Dry off. I'll call the desk and pay for 2 nights." She accepted the towel, wrapping it around her shoulders, and her eyes glistened with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. I've never been so cold in my life," she admitted, stepping into the tiny bathroom stall. He nodded, picking up the phone in the corner. "Front desk," he barked into the receiver. 2 nights. Room 12. Do not." He paused, catching the owner's distracted murmur in the background. "Never mind." He hung up and returned to the main area, dropping into one of the plastic chairs by the TV. He unzipped his backpack and withdrew a thermos of coffee and 2 paper cups. "Hot," he said. "Pouring. Drink up." Victoria emerged from the bathroom looking cleaner but still haunted. She took a cup with a trembling hand and blew across the surface before drinking. "That's incredible," she murmured, warmth spreading through her fingertips. "How did you always have hot coffee on you?" Ryan gave a half smile. "I'm a single dad. Hot coffee is how I survive the world." He leaned back, studying her. In the harsh motel light, she looked vulnerable, yet something in her posture hinted at steel beneath the fragility. "Victoria?" He began using her first name for the first time. "You can trust me. I need to know who you are." She stared at the shifting patterns of light on the wall, lifting her cup to her lips as if buying time. Thunder rumbled outside. Finally, she set the cup down, taking a deep breath. "My name is Isabella Hart," she said. "I'm the CEO of Hartwell Communications. We specialize in secure networks for governments and corporations around the world." She swallowed, voice steadying. "You've been protecting me from an assassination order." Ryan's brow shot up. "Assassination order? That's big." He leaned forward, heart pounding. "You're a billionaire CEO. I've been playing bodyguard for the target of an international conspiracy." Isabella nodded, her eyes fixed on the chipped linoleum floor. "Yes. My company developed a new encryption algorithm, unbreakable, untraceable. It's a game changer for global security." Her voice cracked with fatigue and fear. "But some of my board members sold a copy to hostile nations. When I discovered it, they decided I had to disappear." The weight of her words settled in the stale motel air. Ryan rubbed his temples. "I can't believe this." He stood and crossed to the window, pressing his forehead against the glass. Rainwater trailed down in rivulets. "Why didn't your security detail protect you?" he demanded, voice low but fierce. She looked up, eyes full of guilt. "They were compromised. I realized too late that my own assistant orchestrated the leak and the hit." She slid onto the edge of the bed, knees drawn up. "I trusted them. I thought I could trust anyone I hired. Her voice trembled on that last word. Ryan turned back, heart aching at her vulnerability. You need a team you can trust. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her knee. I can help you. I'll keep you safe, no questions asked. But we need to decide what to do next. Isabella met his gaze, gratitude and relief mingling with uncertainty. What can we do? I don't have proof of who's behind this. If I go to the authorities, they'll call it corporate infighting. By then, they'll have silenced me. Ryan considered this. Outside, the rain flickered against the neon. The only certainty was that her enemies were relentless. We need evidence, he said finally. Proof that your board members, your assistant, ordered the hit. Then we can go public. He stood, voice crisp. Tomorrow, we get out of this room and start digging. She nodded, tears brimming, but determination igniting behind them. Tomorrow. Her voice was soft but resolute. They sank into a tense silence, two strangers bound by desperation and the flickering hope of justice. In that roadside motel room far from the high-rise offices of the corporate world or the safety of home, Isabella Hart had unveiled her true identity, and Ryan Bennett found himself at the center of a conspiracy that would test courage, trust, and the timeless promise a father makes to his daughter that he would do whatever it took to protect the people he loved. Ryan parked the truck out under the wavering glow of the motel's lone street lamp and killed the engine. A second of silence hung between them, broken only by the steady drum of rain on the roof. He glanced at Isabella in the passenger seat. Her eyes were distant, shadowed by more than the late hour. He reached across and offered his hand, which she took with a small, weary nod. Let's get you home, he said quietly. She managed a tired, grateful smile. I thank you, Ryan. He guided her through the rain-slick parking lot, one hand on her elbow to steady her on the uneven pavement. The old duffel bag Isabella carried sloshed with every step. Every so often, she clutched it tighter like a lifeline. Ryan helped her into the back seat, warming the interior by running the heater full blast, and slid into the driver's seat. The truck's cab filled with steam and muffled streetlight. Where is home? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. He started the engine. Mine's not far, just outside of town. A little fixer-upper, but it's got a strong front door. He gave her a reassuring look. You'll be safe there. The drive was short, curving along deserted roads lined with dark pines. Every so often, a flicker of headlights would trace past in the distance, vanishing like ghosts. Isabella watched the road through the windshield, her knuckles white against her bag. When they arrived, Ryan's house looked like any other modest ranch, low eaves, chipped paint, a small porch with a bench that had seen better days. But he'd fortified it over time, reinforced locks, motion sensor lights, and a camera doorbell he'd installed after Mia had nightmares about monsters. He climbed out first, motioning for Isabella to stay inside while he checked the perimeter. She opened the door and stepped into an amber-lit hallway dotted with spring blossoms in vases, her first glimpse of a life that wasn't corporate boardrooms and assassination attempts. A framed photo of Mia in a T-ball uniform waved from the shelf. Isabella paused, letting the quiet warmth wash over her before she heard the lock click from downstairs. Ryan reappeared, pocketing his keys. Okay, he said, his voice steady. Doors locked, windows closed. You're safe. He gestured to the living room. Sit, I'll heat up some soup. Isabella sank onto the worn couch, the fabric coming alive with the small creaks of settling upholstery. Soup sounds. Perfect, she admitted, her voice cracking at the end. She pressed her bag to her chest as if it contained all that remained of her old life. Ryan went to the kitchen and rummaged through the cabinets, pulling out a can of tomato soup, 2 mugs, and the kettle. He filled the kettle at the sink, then set it on the stove. Steam hissed beneath the lid as he opened the soup can and ladled its contents into the mugs. When he returned with both mugs steaming in his hands, he set one on the coffee table and offered the other to Isabella. Here, sip slowly. It'll do more than warm you up. She took the mug with both hands, closing her eyes as the warmth seeped in. Thank you, she said again, more softly this time. Her gaze found the window's black rectangles in the storm. My board. I never thought they'd come after me like this. But money and power, they change people. Ryan perched on the edge of an armchair opposite her. He sipped his soup, then set it aside. Tell me everything, he said gently. Isabella inhaled deeply, clenching the mug as if bracing herself. After we developed the encryption protocol, I realized how valuable it was, not just to us, but to governments around the world. My board members, some of them saw an opportunity to sell it. They leaked prototypes, sold licenses to regimes who would pay anything. I discovered it confronted them. Then my assistant vanished shortly after I got threats. I thought it was a bluff until last night. Her voice trembled, and for a moment Ryan saw not a billionaire CEO, but a frightened woman perched on the edge of a life she once controlled. He leaned forward. Your assistant, any idea where they went or who's behind it? She shook her head. No, that's what terrifies me. It could be any of them. The CFO, the head of R&D, even some of the senior board members. They're united by greed but not by loyalty to one another. I can't trust my own company. He nodded, digesting the breadth of her betrayal. So they want proof destroyed, and you silenced. His words weren't a question. They'll come after any record that ties them to the leak. Isabella's eyes glistened. Exactly. They'll wipe out data, eliminate witnesses. They've already sent hitmen. Ryan rubbed his chin. We need more than a motel stash of towels and soup. We need a plan. I want to help you, but I also have to protect my daughter. Mia's only 8. She paused, tears gathering. I know. That's been my biggest fear, that I'd drag someone else into this. Someone innocent. She looked at him, sorrow and regret etched in her features. I don't want Mia or you to pay for my mistakes. He set his mug down and folded his hands, leaning back. We'll keep you off their radar. My place is a fortress they won't see coming, but we need evidence. We need hard drives. Emails, signed contracts. Something so concrete that when we go public, the world will have to believe you. Isabella stiffened, determination flaring. Yes, I have copies, encrypted backups. Hidden. My lawyer kept them in New York. It's my insurance policy. But getting there, with them hunting us, it's suicide. Ryan studied her, weighing the risk. We'll find a way. We'll need allies, someone you trust who won't turn. He tapped his knuckles on the arm of the chair. I know a guy, my old friend Marcus. He's into cybersecurity freelance. He owes me a favor. He can extract the data safely without leaving a trace. She exhaled, relief flickering. That could work. If he can get it, then we can broadcast everything live. No going back. Ryan nodded. But first we make sure you're safe here. He stood. You'll stay in my guest room, locked door, no windows. I'll set up a laptop for video calls with Marcus. I'll be on guard all the way. Isabella rose, wrapping her arms around herself. You're doing so much for me. She stepped toward him, eyes bright with gratitude. How can I ever thank you? He gave her a small, rueful smile. Just get back to work. And if this all goes sideways, make sure Mia's okay. Her lips trembled. I will. I promise. He patted her shoulder, then took the mugs back to the kitchen. The kettle was still warm, but he didn't bother to refill it. The night stretched ahead, plans to make allies, to contact dangers to outwit. Yet, in that living room cluttered with Mia's homework on the coffee table and family photos lining the walls, Isabella found a measure of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. Ryan returned and flicked off the overhead light, leaving only the lamp by the sofa. Steam curled from the mugs in the dim glow. He handed her back the mug, now mostly empty. Go on, he said gently. Drink the rest. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Isabella cradled the mug, her gaze softening. Thank you, Ryan, she whispered one last time. He stood, voice gentle. Sleep. Tomorrow secrets go on the table and we start taking this back. In the quiet of the storm-battered house, she nodded. Wrapping the blanket tighter, she eased onto the couch and closed her eyes. Outside, the rain continued its relentless symphony, but inside, a fragile alliance had formed, one built on trust, shared danger, and the unwavering promise of a single dad determined to shield his daughter and the stranger whose fate had become their own. Rain-slick pavement gleamed like oil as Ryan parked the truck across the street from Orion Motors' towering glass headquarters. The city lights above pulsed through the droplets that clung to the windshield. Isabella sat beside him, her posture tense, phone clutched in her hand. The email from her chief legal counsel had arrived only minutes ago, emergency board meeting. Your presence is required immediately. She swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in her voice. They've leaked the files. My assistant sent everything to the press. Now they say only I can contain the fallout. Ryan reached across the console, squeezing her hand. We'll get through this. They stepped into the lobby, the doors whooshing shut behind them. The marble floor stretched halfway to the impossibly tall ceiling, reflecting the rows of polished suits striding purposefully past. A bank of receptionists greeted them with polite smiles, but their eyes darted to Isabella, as if to confirm she was the woman who'd made the news headlines. She cleared her throat. "I'm here for the board," she said to the nearest desk attendant. He offered a curt nod and tapped a name into his tablet. "Ms. Hart, please proceed to the executive elevators. Security will escort you." Suit-clad guards materialized beside them, faces as unreadable as etched granite. Isabella allowed herself a stiff nod. She knew Ryan was on his own. He slipped back, fingers brushing her arm. "Stay safe," he said. She offered herself a steel smile and disappeared down the corridor. Ryan watched the guard doors close behind her before steeling himself and heading for the visitor lounge. Inside, a handful of executives milled about with coffee cups and tablets. He recognized the CFO, the man who'd plotted to sell Orion's secrets, hovering by the barista station, his gold cufflinks flashing under the fluorescent lights. The CFO glanced at Isabella's empty chair at the far end of the room and sneered. Ryan's jaw hardened. He approached a friendly face, a regional VP named Carla, who'd once visited his garage during Orion's community outreach. "Carla," he said quietly. "Has Ms. Hart arrived?" She glanced around, tension flickering in her eyes. "She's in the boardroom." "And they're not happy. They blame her for the leak, even though she didn't authorize it." Ryan nodded, suppressing anger. "Thanks." He moved toward the heavy doors marked Executive Boardroom. Inside, the room was harsher than he expected, a long obsidian table under pinpoint lighting surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by stern-faced directors. Isabella stood at the head of the table, her shoulders squared even as she clutched the edge of the table for support. At her side waited her legal counsel, shoulders hunched beneath his tailored suit. As Ryan slipped in unnoticed behind two burly security officers, the CFO rose. "Isabella," he said, voice dripping with false concern. "The public backlash is catastrophic. Our stock is plummeting. Partnerships are on the line. We need swift action. A public resignation could be the price for any further leaks before this drags us all under." A low murmur of agreement rippled around the table. Isabella's eyes froze with defiance. "I didn't leak anything." "But the chairman?" A silver-haired woman named Marjorie cut in. "Save it, Isabella. You're the only one with the authority to manage this crisis. If you won't step down, then you must bear the blame." Isabella closed her eyes, fractionally collecting herself. She opened a leather portfolio, removing a slim stack of glossy binders. "These are the unredacted documents proving who colluded to sell our encryption. They're scheduled to go live tonight." Shock rippled through the room. The CFO's smirk faltered. "You're bluffing." She tapped the files. "I'm not. My assistant uploaded everything. You have until midnight to come clean. Otherwise, I'll deploy them across every major news outlet." Silence crashed down like thunder. The board members exchanged terrified glances. Some shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward, studying her with recalculated wariness. The CFO recovered first, his voice low and threatening. "You'd burn us all to save yourself." Isabella held his gaze. "I'd stop you from betraying this company and protect every employee, especially my people." Ryan watched from the doorway, heart pounding at her courage. Yet he knew courage alone wouldn't win this fight. He slipped in, further lingering near the back of the room. Marjorie cleared her throat. "This is unprecedented. A public scandal could collapse Orion overnight." She met Isabella's eyes. "But a private settlement buying back the assets, quieting the press, could salvage our reputation. If you step aside voluntarily, we'll protect your interests and ensure you're never implicated." Isabella set the files down deliberately. "You mean cover up your crimes," she said. "No. I'll expose everything." The CFO's knuckle whitened on the table. "You're risking it all." She drew in a slow breath. "I'm saving it all." A tense hush fell. Then Marjorie nodded once sharply. "Very well. You leave us no choice." The chairman's voice echoed off the steel walls as the board erupted in hurried murmurs. Security officers moved to escort Isabella out. That's when Ryan stepped forward. He had no plan for this moment, no official role in Orion's boardroom, but he knew enough to act. He cleared his throat, forceful. "Excuse me." All eyes swung to him, the CEO, the chairman, the CFO, even the legal counsel. He squared his shoulders. I'm Ryan Bennett. I owe Ms. Hart everything. My house, my security, my daughter's safety. I don't know corporate law, but I know loyalty, and I'm not leaving. A board member snorted. This is highly irregular. Ryan met their gazes head on. Maybe. But consider this: if your next move is to whisk her away and sweep everything under the rug, you'll have one more betrayal to explain. You've already lost public trust. Do you really want to lose the trust of your own people? The room went icy. Isabella shot him a look of stunned gratitude. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. We appreciate your passion, she said calmly. But this is now corporate territory. Ryan shook his head. This isn't about corporate territory. It's about right and wrong. A tense beat. Then, Isabella's counsel, always cautious, spoke up. She's right. This leak is already public knowledge. Any further cover-up would be self-destructive. Marjorie studied the two of them, the small-town dad and the embattled CEO. Finally, she gathered herself and straightened. Agreed. We will proceed with a transparent review. All documents will be audited. If misdeeds occurred, we will hold those responsible accountable. A low murmur of relief broke out. The CFO clenched and unclenched his fists, but said nothing. Isabella exhaled. Thank you. Ryan stepped back, heart still pounding. He watched as the board chair called for order, instructing the CFO to begin the audit process and legal to coordinate with Isabella's team. The room's tension lifted, replaced by cautious cooperation. Outside the conference room, Isabella waited as Ryan rejoined her. She reached for his hand. I never expected you'd step in. He gave her a crooked smile. I couldn't stand by and watch you get steamrolled. She squeezed his hand, eyes bright. You saved me again. He shrugged. We saved each other. As they walked out through the lobby, the suits who had glared now offered nods of respect. Even the CFO gave a grudging half-smile as they passed. The polished marble no longer felt cold. It felt like the arena where justice, however messy, had a chance to win. Outside, the rain had eased and the city lights shone like beacons. Ryan paused, looking up at the Orion Tower. He didn't feel like an intruder anymore. He felt like a guardian. Isabella slipped her arm through his. Come on, she said softly. Mia's waiting. Ryan smiled and led her back to the truck. As they drove away, the skyscraper faded in the rearview mirror, its blazing windows a reminder that sometimes, even in the coldest halls of power, a single act of courage could reshape the game. The morning sun glinted off the polished conference table, turning it into a mirror for the tense faces gathered around it. Ryan Bennett leaned forward, palms flat on the gleaming surface, tracing an invisible line between the stack of technical reports on the left and the exploded diagram of Orion Motors' flagship model on the right. Around him, a half-dozen engineers in crisp polo shirts and khakis exchanged skeptical glances, their lines of code and CAD renderings clearly better suited for boardroom slides than a grease-stained mechanic's rag. But Ryan wasn't fazed. He tapped a thick page of test data where suspension deflection numbers spiked at certain speeds. See these readings here? He asked, voice calm but firm. All the simulations show stability up to 60 miles per hour. But on the real track, the car jumps every time it hits those expansion joints. That spike, he pointed, that's the moment the dampers bottom out. Dr. Priya Sharma, lead systems engineer, frowned at her tablet. We ran the finite element analysis 3 times. The CAD model aligns with spec. If anything, the physical testing is flawed. Ryan shook his head, a small creak in his voice that betrayed late nights spent poring over manuals. I've been in the trenches literally. When your damper bottoms out, you're not talking about a few extra millimeters of travel. You're talking a harsh snap that tears at the mounting points. Eventually, metal fatigue sets in, and that's where catastrophic failure happens. A ripple of chatter broke out, some whispered agreement, others reluctant praise of his down-home terminology. The CFO, still nursing a bruised ego, glared at Ryan's boots and looked back at the engineers. So you're saying we divert from the standard calibration? Ryan met his gaze without flinching. Standard calibration assumes your damper valving stays linear under load. In our tests, it doesn't. We need to revalve the dampers so the compression curve softens right before the bump. That'll keep the wheel in contact with the road instead of slamming through. Silence stretched as the team digested the proposal. Then Priya tapped her tablet again, scrolling to overlay simulation with real-world telemetry. If we adjust the flow control valve by 20%, we might reduce the deceleration peak by half. It's unconventional, but it could work. Ryan nodded. Exactly. It's unconventional, but so was trusting a small-town mechanic with your flagship, yet here we are. A few engineers exchanged wry smiles. One younger engineer, Marcus, cleared his throat. I think we can prototype this today. We have a spare set of dampers in the R&D lab. If we modify the shim stack and test it on the rig, we'll know by this afternoon. The CFO pursed his lips, conflicted. Then he looked at Marjorie, the chair of the board, her silver hair framing an expression that blended prudence and hope. She inclined her head once crisply. Proceed, she said. Relief and determination flickered across Ryan's face. Thank you. Let's get to work. The morning hours blurred into a whirlwind of activity. In the R&D bay, Ryan stood over a chassis mounted on a hydraulic rig, the original dampers removed and replaced with the modded prototypes. Engineers huddled around laptops, tweaking control algorithms and monitoring pressure gauges. Lucas, the head of test operations, leaned in. We're ready for the first cycle. Stand by. Ryan gave a small thumbs up. He'd never imagined himself orchestrating a high-tech test, but there he was, guiding engineers with the same certainty he'd once used to teach his daughter Mia how to ride a bike. When the rig cycled, the car's simulated wheels dropped into the troughs in the floor surrogate expansion joints, and then there was only a gentle compliance instead of the violent jolt before. The control room exploded in excited chatter. Priya punched her tablet. Readings are stable, peak deceleration down by 60%, ride height remains consistent. Ryan allowed himself a satisfied grin. That's it. By late afternoon, the team had rerun several more cycles, each confirming that the new damper valving held firm. The engineers moved from test rig to track simulator, running virtual drive loops and live data playback. Finally, Lucas turned to Ryan, eyes bright. We can sign off on the fix. No delay necessary. Back in the boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted from grim resignation to cautious optimism. The CFO, arms crossed, cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, I have to admit I thought you were out of your depth, but this works. It'll save the launch. Ryan shrugged, feeling uncharacteristically pleased by the compliment. I just fixed a problem, same as always. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out Mia's crayon-scrawled note, best fixer ever. He laid it on the table. The children's literature professor turned VP next to him, stifled a chuckle before her face softened. Marjorie leaned forward, gaze sweeping the group. This is more than a quick patch. This is a demonstration that hands-on experience and fresh perspective have a place at Orion Motors. I propose we formally recognize Mr. Bennett's contribution, effective immediately. Applause rippled around the table, genuine and enthusiastic. The board members rose to their feet, many offering handshakes and nods of respect. The CFO offered a grudging smile as he approached Ryan. Welcome to the team, Mr. Bennett. I hope you'll accept a permanent position because we need this kind of ingenuity. Ryan met his gaze, shaking his head with a rueful grin. I appreciate it, but I'm just a dad who wanted to keep his family safe. I'll help however I can. Isabella, standing at the head of the table, now stepped forward. Her eyes glistened with pride and relief. I know how much you've given up to be here, Ryan, and how much you've risked. You've earned whatever title you want. Senior Technical Advisor. She gestured at the engineers or head of problem solvers. Honestly, I don't care what it says on the business card. I just can't imagine this team without you. Ryan felt his throat tighten. He glanced at the door, picturing Mia waiting at home, eager for dinner and her nightly bedtime story. Then he returned to Isabella's gaze. I'd be honored. Laughter and applause broke out anew, filling the room with energy that banished the last shadows of doubt. As the board members began to discuss implementation plans, training sessions, departmental budgets, project roadmaps, Ryan slipped out of the circle, stepping back to the edge of the room. He rested a hand on Isabella's shoulder. Hey, he said softly. She turned, smiling warmly. Thank you. He nodded, his gaze drifting to the downtown skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city pulsed with possibility. He thought of home, of Mia's proud grin, as she'd learned to draw straight lines of the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings of quiet nights rebuilt by courage and kindness. "Let's go home," he said. Isabella nodded, and together they left the boardroom. The doors slid shut behind them, and in that polished chamber of power, Ryan's crumpled note lay atop the table, a testament to the truth that real expertise often comes from the simplest places, and that a single dad with grease under his nails can stand toe-to-toe with the brightest minds in the business. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the polished plaza. Ryan felt lighter than he had in months. He'd come from grease to glass, proved his worth, and forged a bond that would carry him through whatever challenges lay ahead. Above all, he'd shown Mia and himself that no matter how small you start, determination and heart can drive you to heights you never thought possible. And as they walked to the waiting car, he knew this was just the beginning of a new journey, one built on trust, resilience, and the power of believing in the person right next to you. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Orion Motors' executive conference room, casting long, warm beams across the polished mahogany table. Ryan Bennett stood at the head of the table, face illuminated by presentation slides that confirmed what everyone in that room had been fervently hoping for. Orion's flagship vehicle was ready to launch on schedule. He clicked off his tablet, the final dataset real-world track results showing perfectly calibrated suspension vanishing from the screen. Almost instinctively, a ripple of applause began. At first slow, then surging into a full standing ovation, the assembled board members rose to their feet, their faces bright with genuine admiration. Ryan felt a flush of disbelief at hearing the sound he who had entered this room 2 days earlier as an underqualified mechanic, now greeted as a savior of multi-million-dollar product lines. Marjorie Sinclair, the chairwoman, stepped forward, offering her hand. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice clear and warm, "your insight and your courage have done more than save a launch. You've saved countless jobs and preserved Orion's reputation. On behalf of the board, thank you." Ryan shook her hand, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He looked around the room, catching eyes that had once glinted with skepticism, now brimming with respect. Dr. Priya Sharma, who had initially questioned his unconventional approach, gave him a broad grin and a thumbs up from across the table. Lucas, the head of test operations, clapped him on the back so hard that Ryan felt his shoulder jolt. So many faces that had once tallied his shortcomings were now warmed by recognition. Isabella Hart, CEO of Orion Motors and the world's most powerful tech magnate, stood beside him. Her emerald green blazer contrasted with the sea of navy and charcoal around them, drawing all attention. As the clapping died down, she raised a hand for silence. "I want you all to remember this day," she began, voice resonant enough to fill every corner of the lofty room. "Today we witness the power of fresh perspective and unyielding determination. Ryan, you came here doubted by many, but you didn't let that stop you from doing what needed to be done. You earned every bit of this respect and more." Again, applause broke out, this time more personal, directed squarely at Ryan. He realized his heart pounded not from adrenaline, but from something deeper, a sense of vindication. All the morning spent scrubbing grease from his hands, the empty dinners. When Mia waited for him, the self-doubt that had whispered he'd never belong among these polished professionals, everything coalesced into a quiet, triumphant roar inside him. As the board members began to disperse, still offering hearty handshakes and pats on the back, Isabella leaned close to Ryan. Her voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "You know they would never have made it this far without you." Ryan managed a weary smile. "I just fixed a problem." She laughed softly, a sound of genuine affection. "That's understated as always. But it's why you're more hero than handyman." He raised an eyebrow. "Hero might be too much." She shook her head. "No, not to Mia." At the mention of his daughter, Ryan's expression softened. His mind flicked to images of her drawing stick figures, one always holding a wrench, her pride at calling him best fixer ever. Now he carried a different, heavier title in this boardroom world. He slipped a hand into his back pocket and retrieved Mia's crayon-scrawled note. Unfolding it, he turned it upward and held it between them. Isabella's eyes glistened when she saw it. "She's your true north," she said, touching the edge of the paper. He nodded, careful not to tear the thin paper. "She gave me this for good luck." "Looks like it worked." Isabella replied, offering him a genuine open smile. A hush fell as the two of them looked out at the departure of board members, the room now emptying except for a few loyal executives. Ryan felt a sudden pang of emotion, pride in his work relief that Mia's future was secure, and a quiet gratitude that kindness had brought him here. They began to step toward the door together. Isabella paused, turning back to the room one last time. "Let's make sure we keep harnessing this unexpected brilliance," she said, nodding toward Ryan. "This is just the beginning of what you and I can do." Ryan's heart fluttered at her words. "I'm in," he said softly, but with surprising conviction. Outside the conference room, the hallway glowed in the golden late daylight. As they walked, Isabella slipped her arm through his, a gesture that spoke of partnership rather than hierarchy. "Dinner tonight," she asked, casual but intentional. "You, me, and that note of Liam's." Ryan laughed, the sound light and free. "I'd like that. I owe her a story about her dad's big day." Isabella smiled knowingly. "I can't wait to hear it." They stepped into the bustling lobby, the insistent hum of the building resuming around them, security guards, busy assistants, the distant rev of tests on the R&D floor. Yet in that moment, Ryan felt perfectly at home. He glanced down at his worn jeans and work boots. They were greasy, scuffed, unmistakably his. Before today, he might have been self-conscious walking these glossy hallways in such attire. But now those very jeans were proof of a lifetime spent solving problems, of a man who never quit, and of a father's determination to build a future for his child. He looked up at Isabella, her confident stride matching his own. The city skyline outside beckoned a glittering expanse of possibility. He realized that the distance between grease pits and glass towers had shrunk to nothing more than a single act of courage. Together they moved forward, stepping into the next chapter, one where respect had been earned, where vindication had transformed into opportunity, and where a single moment of kindness had reshaped two lives forever. As they walked down the corridors of power, Ryan Bennett carried with him every lesson learned that true expertise transcends titles, that respect is earned through action, and that a dad's love can be stronger than any boardroom politics. And at his side, Isabella Hart, once a frightened stranger, now walked as an ally, forever grateful and forever changed. The morning sun glinted off the last patches of snow melting on the Bennett family's driveway, turning every droplet into a tiny prism of light. The cold air still lingered in the scent of damp asphalt and pine from the nearby woods, but the warmth of the moment beneath the carport made Ryan Bennett pull his coat tighter around his chest with a satisfied grin. Under the soft hum of an electric heater, 8-year-old Mia crouched beside a restored 1967 Mustang, her small hands gripping a spark plug as she gingerly handed it to Isabella Hart. Isabella, still clad in her tailored blazer from last night's gala, had rolled up her sleeves and let the engine oil stain her cuffs as she carefully guided Mia's hands into the engine bay. Their laughter bounced off the brick facade of the garage, bright and infectious. "Careful with the threads, sweetie," Isabella coached, her voice light but patient as she demonstrated how to screw the plug into place. Mia's tongue peeked out in concentration, and with a gentle click, the plug seated perfectly. A triumphant giggle burst from her lips. "Got it!" she crowed, high-fiving Isabella. Ryan watched from the doorway, leaning against the jamb with arms crossed, pride swelling in his chest. Just a few days ago, both of them had been strangers thrust together under perilous circumstances. Now here they were, two women from entirely different worlds bonding over a vintage car and the promise of spring. "Look at you," Ryan said, voice thick with affection, teaching the CEO how to be a mechanic. He stepped forward, brushing snowflakes from his hair and crouching beside Mia. "You doing okay there, kiddo?" Mia beamed up at him, her cheeks flushed from the cool air and excitement. "Dad, she's the best teacher ever." "Right, Miss Isabella?" Isabella chuckled, wiping a smudge of grease from Mia's forehead. "I'm learning as much from you as you are from me." She straightened, brushing back her hair. "I never realized how much goes into keeping an old beauty like this running smoothly." The Mustang, its faded teal paint now gleaming after a fresh coat of wax, sat proud on its jack stands. A few tools were scattered on the concrete floor, a torque wrench, a funnel, and a rag dotted with oil spots. The scene looked more like a family project than the culmination of a high-stakes corporate rescue. Ryan rose and stretched his back, the ache from yesterday morning's boardroom still faint in his muscles. but outweighed by the contentment he felt now. "All right, moment of truth," he said, moving to the driver's seat and turning the key. The engine roared to life in a healthy rumble that echoed through the garage and out into the crisp morning air. Mia and Isabella exchanged delighted looks. "You did it?" Mia exclaimed, running around the front of the car to look up at her father. Ryan cut the engine with a gentle twist, then climbed out and tossed the keys to Isabella. "Your turn." He invited a playful glint in his eyes. Isabella caught the keys with both hands, her gaze softening as she looked at Ryan. She slid into the driver's seat, her blazer now unbuttoned, and turned the key. The Mustang responded instantly, its purrs smooth as silk. She leaned out the window, beaming. "Let's see if I can handle that steering wheel." Mia dashed around to Isabella's side and offered a hand, which Isabella took before the CEO climbed down. They switched places under Ryan's encouragement, Mia pretending to shift gears and Isabella crouching to her level to let her guide the wheel. The simplicity of the moment, just three people sharing time, laughter, and elbow grease, felt like the best possible antidote to the last few weeks of danger and intrigue. Back inside the warmth of the garage, Ryan fetched 3 mugs and poured hot chocolate for Mia. Coffee for himself and strong black coffee for Isabella. The 3 of them settled on old wooden stools by a narrow workbench, sipping their drinks as the Mustang's engine coolly ticked in the background. "Remember when you first showed up here bleeding and exhausted?" Ryan asked, nodding toward Isabella. "I honestly didn't know what to think. Now look at us." Isabella raised her mug with a wry smile. "I remember thinking, this guy might just be crazy enough to save me." And he did. Her gaze softened as she looked at Mia. "And you young ladies saved both of us with your courage and kindness." Mia hugged her mug cheeks warm from the chocolate and pride. "I just wanted everyone to be safe." "That you did?" Ryan said, turning to Isabella. "You know, before all this, I never imagined someone like you would be tinkering on old cars in my driveway." Isabella set her mug down gently. "I never imagined I'd find more support in a small-town garage than in a boardroom. You and Mia showed me what really matters. People, not profits." Ryan nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee. Mia's mom used to say the same thing. She'd be proud to see this, how far a little kindness can go. His eyes softened, and Mia reached over to squeeze his hand. Isabella placed her hand over theirs. "And now your kindness has saved lives, protected futures, and built something stronger than any corporate contract. You gave me a second chance, Ryan, a chance to rebuild trust both in myself and my company." Ryan's chest tightened at her words. "We all deserve a second chance," he said quietly. "Even me." He gestured around the garage. "I've spent my life underestimating what I could do. Tonight, yesterday, everything changed." Mia's brow furrowed in concern. "Daddy, are you okay?" Ryan lowered his voice to a gentle rumble. "I've never been better, Mia." He stood and lifted her onto his hip. "But I think it's time we took care of a few more things around here." "Right?" Mia squealed in delight, and Isabella laughed. "What's next on the list, Mr. Bennett?" she asked. Ryan looked at the socket set, the empty toolboxes, and the Mustang waiting patiently for its wheels. "Well, I think that old Mustang deserves some new tires, and then maybe we take her for a spin around town." "What do you think?" Team Isabella winked at Mia. "Count me in." Mia pumped her fist. "Let's do it." The 3 of them moved into action, grabbing wrenches and chatting about torque specs and tire pressure as though they'd been a team for years. The warmth of their camaraderie filled every corner of the garage, weaving a new memory into the Bennett home's legacy, one of resilience, unexpected friendship, and hope. Outside, the last snow patches shimmered like forgotten diamonds beneath the wide blue sky. Inside, the engine's purr had cooled to a calm hum, and the laughter of a little girl and her 2 heroes echoed like a promise that even the coldest, darkest nights can give way to mornings warmer than any before, and that a single act of kindness can spark a future brighter than anyone dared imagine. And as the engine of life turned once more, Ryan Bennett knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was only the beginning of their brighter tomorrow.